very excited about today's video because I'm going to be doing an updated version of my top 3 in every category. And I have the products sitting next to me right now, and I'm just like so eager to talk about these because these are the best of the best in my opinion. Some of these, like, you can see, there's some dents. I do some sort of like updated version of this every year, and for this video, I actually want to split it up into 2. So today we've got part 1. We're gonna talk like base, complexion, blush, bronzer, all of that. And then in Friday's video, I will share part 2. We'll do like eyes, lips, palettes, all of that. Okay, we're going to start in primer just based on like the order of application, but I will say primer for me, you know me, I am a little bit indifferent when it comes to primer. It is not a step I do every single day. There are a handful, even when we get to highlighter, that's not a step I do every single day either. So I will say, I don't think either of those categories are necessarily like hard hitters here, just because I am not a primer girly, but maybe that's saying a lot that I picked these though, because it's like I really don't use primer except for these. Starting with, oh, wait, I'm lying. Okay. Actually, there's another primer. Hold on. Now I'm looking at these 3 and I'm like, which one do I omit to replace with the other primer? Oh, okay, wait. I grabbed the other one. I'll tell you we'll call it the runner-up. This is the one that I was going to mention, the Hard Candy Sheer Envy Hydrating Primer that I've loved for years. Still think this is a fantastic primer, but I had to get rid of one and that was the one. So these are the top 3. So the one that I grabbed, I'm almost out of actually. I'm like, really, at the bottom of this, it is the Danessa Myricks Yummy Skin Glow Serum Primer. Funny enough, consistency-wise, I find that it does something very similar to the next one I'm going to discuss, but this is a very serum-y, gel-like product. I feel like it just sits on top of the skin in a way that provides a little bit of hydration, but also preps really well to put foundation over top of. You're gonna see here, like I have a type when it comes to primer, because the next 2 I'm gonna mention, they're all similar. So probably better suited to dry skin. I don't know if you would be in love with this if you have oily skin. This actually does come in 2 shades, so there's not much of a tint. It's pretty insignificant, but it does have a little bit of a tint. Provides the most minor amount of glow. It more so is just like that hydrating gel base that my makeup looks so much better on top of. I feel like it does a lot of the same things as this. This is the Glow Recipe Night. This is not a primer, but for the purpose of today's video, I use this as a primer. It's the Glow Recipe Watermelon Glow Niacinamide Dewdrops. I've gone through a whole bottle of this. I'm on to my second one, and it looks like she's about halfway done also. I really enjoy this. I don't even use this as skincare, really. This doesn't really make its way into my skincare routine. I'm only using it as primer, but I love the hydration it gives me. As someone who has skin that literally flakes off my face, on my chin, this is one of the few products, that plus the Danessa Myricks, that I actually notice a difference with to prevent the flaking and peeling. And then we've got to talk about e.l.f. Power Grip. I think it also provides a little bit of the hydration that the other ones do, but this has that sticky base. I'm sure you've heard a ton about this, but I do think it is a great primer. I was like really excited to sit down and film this video because there aren't as many carryover products as I was anticipating. A lot of times, if I'm coming back with my favorites, when they're like my true favorites, oftentimes I'm still loving them like year over year. This time around though, there definitely are some carryover products, but I feel like there are a few others that I wasn't as into last year, but now I love. So for foundation, my top pick, I'm almost out of this. Look at this. Do you see that? Do you see that there's like an empty spot? This, like, once I use this up, I will repurchase this, and I don't repurchase foundations really. I have enough. Like, once I run out of one, sometimes I'll miss them, but I rarely repurchase one. I will 100,000% repurchase the Tarte Shape Tape Cloud Coverage. I have mine in the shade 20B Light Beige. This, when I have like the slightest bit of tan, is my perfect shade match. When I'm at my absolute most pale, it's a little bit too dark. And this is, okay, if you are familiar with either the e.l.f. Camo CC, now hear me out, I hate the e.l.f. Camo CC, so keep listening, I'm not done yet, but e.l.f. Camo CC or the It Cosmetics CC Cream. This is like the better version of those. It's that type of consistency, it's that medium buildable coverage. You could also take it to a more light coverage level. It's dewy, but it's not dewy in a way where my face feels like tacky and sticky. It's more so just this like illuminated glow. I love it. my second favorite. Predictable maybe, Fenty Eavesdrop. I love this. I have the shade 5. It's way too dark for me. I always have to mix this unless I'm like happen to be super duper tan. Funny enough, this was actually I was shade matched to this shade by one of the Fenty makeup artists, but I don't know if I was just like really tan that day or what, but it's not my color. This is more medium coverage, light medium I would say, but it's like a skin tint for people that like a matte finish. And funny enough, even though I have dry skin, I like a matte finish. And I was actually joking about that this weekend. I mentioned like, oh, I like my makeup to look almost powdery and matte. And someone was like, well, don't you have dry skin? Why would you like that? And I'm like, yeah, this is the way nature intended for me to look, matte. Like, I don't know, that's what I like. So this, you can bring out a little bit of a glow depending on like what you want to manipulate it with in terms of your base and some mix-ins and other products, but on its own it pulls a lot more matte than most skin tints, but because of that I think it just looks so much more smooth and perfected. And then this formula is kind of like the oddball because I find it pretty different than the other two, but it's the Catrice True Skin Hydrating Foundation. Unfortunately I don't know my shade, you guys. I'm so sorry, I have absolutely no idea because I used to have it memorized, but the sticker came off and I don't know what it is. But it wouldn't be helpful to you anyways because this is way too dark for me. So this is medium to full coverage, definitely a little bit more perfecting glam, but I don't think it looks heavy. It just like always looks nice, but I have to be in the mood to like look like I'm wearing makeup. You know what I mean? It's not super heavy, but it's not as undetectable as some others, but that's why I like this when I'm going for more of a glam look. But I did just post my entire drugstore collection, so you saw me talk about this, a bunch of other foundations. I can leave that link down below. That video is like an hour and a half. I walked you through every single thing, swatches, all of it, so I will have that linked. I have some newer favorites for concealers also. Let's start with one I've been talking about a lot, the Natasha Denona High Glam Concealer. Funny enough, I don't hear a lot of people liking this. It seems to be an incredibly polarizing product. I happen to be obsessed with it. Like, it's probably my #1 concealer. I have the shade N4. I'm wearing it currently. This, I would say, is so high pigment that you don't need much product. And I wouldn't say it's thick because I don't think it looks cakey, but I don't think it has like a thin serum-y consistency that some concealers can. So I think maybe for some people that's why they don't enjoy it. But I find if you use almost none of this, you can get the most beautiful, perfected coverage. Like, I just do a little dot of this, tap it out either with my sponge or a velour puff, and I feel like everything is concealed. It sits well, doesn't sink in. I will say though, this is one of those concealers where if you use a lot, if you're doing triangles there, you're probably not gonna like this. You're gonna find it heavy, but you don't need to use a lot. It's like one little dot will do your whole under eye. Kind of similar, is the Flower Beauty Get Real Serum Concealer. This, I would say, has a very similar level of coverage, and I also think it sits equally as smooth on the under eyes, but the consistency is much more serum-like. You have a little bit, like a slightly more glowy finish to it, whereas the Natasha Denona sets down matte. Love this. The third one I'm out of right now, but it is the sister product to the Catrice Foundation. It is the True Skin Concealer. That line is perfection. I've used that concealer up. It's like a pretty popular concealer, but for good reason. It's amazing, good coverage, smooth on the under eyes. I love it. Okay, for powders. I am a big powder person. As you know, I like a matte finish. And the newest powder obsession I have is the Jones Road powder, but specifically the pink one. And it's taken me by surprise. I never expected I would be a pink under eye powder lover because like this is a pretty noticeable pink. It's not just like, oh, there's a little pink undertone to it. No, like this is straight up pink. Now the thing about a pink powder, you almost have to alter your application just slightly. I do think this looks beautiful over the entire face. I know a lot of people use pink powder specifically on the under eyes for a brightening effect, but I think this wears wonderfully on the entire face. Like, it doesn't really matter the region if you apply it correctly. So what I'll say is I recommend using a very fluffy brush. I would not pick this up with a brush that has a lot of density to it because that's where you're going to see that pink pigment a lot more apparent. You really want it just dusted over the skin to kind of like blur everything out. This is one of the most blurring powders that I found. It is perfecting. It is like, I'm not going to say it's heavy because it's not heavy, but like, you're going to look matte. This powder is going to be doing some work. It's not going to be one of those powders where you're like, oh, that's undetectable. No. So I would say you gotta like powder for this, but if you like powder, this one doesn't look heavy, it doesn't look cakey, it is just like perfection. And under the eyes, it brightens, and the pink, I find, putting it all over my face brightens. And I don't have a pink undertone, but I still find that this just gives me this beautiful, like, almost luminosity to my face without any sort of like actual shine, just like this brightness, you know? And I was worried at first that the pink was just going to make me look like I didn't have a matching undertone, you know, but it doesn't. Some of these, you guys, I'm sure you're like, Kelly, we know you like the Jones Road powder, because some of them I feel like I've been talking about a lot, but that's how you know. They're my true favorites. Like, these really are the top 3. But next we have one that is just like undefeated. This is always here, year after year after year, the Kosas Cloud Set powder. I mean, look at the dent I have in this. I don't know. It's hard to say on camera because you have to like see it from the side. Actually, and this is like the same color as my background. You see what I mean? Do you see? There's like a huge dent in this. I actually feel like I'm going to hit pan really soon. This is like the antithesis of everything that I just said about the Jones Road powder. The Jones Road powder, it looks a little powdery, you know? A little, just a little. This doesn't. This is like you don't have powder on, but you're smooth and perfected. It is like so lightweight. This is a powder that I highly recommend to anyone with dry skin, but weirdly enough, I've had so many subscribers that have told me they have oily skin and they love this too. It's not gonna really mattify you, but it's going to blur. It's almost like a filter on the skin. Like, it's minimal, it's perfecting. I love this. And then maybe the marriage of the two of them, like somewhere in the middle sits the LYS Triple Fix powder. I have the translucent shade, but they do have a few skin tone shades of this as well. I really enjoy a pressed powder, and I just find that this formulation is light enough, but still kind of sets my product in, mattifies in a way that doesn't look cakey or powdery. It's another one I talk about a lot. Okay, so when I was choosing like blush, bronzer, and highlight, I was asking myself, do I do separate categories like liquid and then powder? And I thought about doing that, but I'm like, honestly, I just like my powder product so much more that these recommendations come so much higher from me than liquids. I will say though, I'm very picky about liquid products. I think it's a lot harder to formulate a fantastic liquid or cream cheek product than it is a powder one. But I decided to combine these, and I'm like, it's just gonna be like my top 3 blushes. It doesn't matter like which medium they are. If it's a liquid, it's a powder, it doesn't matter. These are the top 3. So starting with bronzer, I think 2 of these you're gonna be able to really easily guess if you know me, but the third one might be a curveball, but maybe not if you've been watching me for a few years. So let's get the obvious one out of the way. This Fenty bronzer, okay? Do you see this? I'm about to hit pan on this. Like, every day I use this, I think, is today the day? The rings are like, it's right there. So this is the Sunstalker bronzer in the lightest shade, Into Sun. This is one of the lightest bronzers I have found, and I think that's why I'm so obsessed with it, because in my experience with fair skin, a lot of bronzers can just pull so orange. They can look a little bit patchy. I like my bronzer really only to be just a few shades deeper than my skin tone. If I'm trying to bronze with something so much darker, it looks patchy usually. It's a lot harder to work with. This is so user friendly because the shade is perfect. The undertone, like, it has this more neutral undertone. It doesn't pull orange, but I still think the shade of it somehow looks like natural and like sun-kissed still without being too warm. It feels like butter. Like, I love it. Also this, you know this, but if you happen to be new here and you haven't heard me talk about this 5 million times, this is the Makeup Revolution Ultra Cream Bronzer in the shade Light. Funny enough, this is kind of deep for being the shade Light, but I find that it shears out really well. Just to put these next to one another, like, it is kind of deep for being light, but I've never run into a problem with that. This is like so pigmented, but it shears out in the best way. Never patchy, doesn't fade. It's so good. And then, wait, I should have like hyped this up. Okay, do you know what number 3 is? I think if you've been here a while, you will. And it was hard for me to pick a third because I was like, those two, no thought. It was just like, yeah, duh, those two. But then I was like, well, wait, what's my third favorite? And I kind of went back and forth on a few. But one that I really loved for years. And this formulation, honestly kind of underrated. It was more talked about a few years back, but okay. I'll tell you what it is. This is the Nabla Skin Glazing line. This is the Skin Bronzing Bronzer. I have the shade Ambra, and I will give you a spoiler alert. One of my other favorites that we're going to talk about today is also from this line. So this line includes blushes, bronzers, and highlights. And the type of powder product that's so popular right now is this type of product. So I'm kind of surprised that we don't hear about these more. I know it's an older launch, but it's this baked formula that sits so smooth on the skin, but it has this luminous glow to it without being like straight up sparkly. Think Hourglass Ambient Lighting blushes or like the new blushes from Essence. I mean, this is a bronzer, but I'm talking about the line in general. Think that, but slightly less glowy. You know what I'm saying? This is just like, it builds up so beautifully. It looks natural. It looks luminous while still being a powder. It's smoothing. It's very, very good formula. Okay, blush. Blush is like my favorite thing. So this was both hard and easy, I would say. You could likely guess these, but we'll start off with the easiest one. You know, we'll start off in the easy mode and then we'll move up to like slightly more advanced. The easiest one to guess is this. It's Bare Minerals Bronzer. It's a back-to-back winner. I have the lightest shade, which is Kiss of Pink. Old packaging, the new packaging is black, but they just came out with 2 new shades of this, which is exciting. I want them to do even more. Like, this line was originally limited edition, then they kept it. They only had 3 shades, now they're adding more. Like, I'm like, good, because this is such a fantastic formula. Don't listen to the name is a lie. The like combination of blush and bronzer makes you think this is gonna be like a combination of blush and bronzer. It's not, it's just a beautiful blush. But it has that almost sunburnt warmth to it that just looks really, really natural. So I love this one. And then I knew I was going to pick one of the Persona Super Blushes, which is their powder formula, but I was like, do I choose Bubble, the bright pink, or do I choose Georgia, the peach? Which is funny too, because when these first launched a few years ago, my favorite was Caramel. And now I rarely use that one. It's normally the other two. Can you guess? I went with Bubble. Because the next blush I'm going to mention, I just scratched my face, but the next blush I'm going to mention is a peach. So I will say I'm not as into the like baby pink cool tone bubblegum blush right now. I think I'm going to return to it probably in the winter, but for summer I've been into a blush that has more warmth to it, so like a peach or even a burnt kind of red, but I still think this is a classic. I think it is flattering on pretty much anyone, and I've seen this shade in particular work for such a range of skin tones. When this was first launched, I was like, I don't know if that's gonna wear well on me, because I thought it might be too bright, but this has a little bit of a sheerness to it that I think builds up really well. Interestingly enough, I find this particular shade is more sheer than the other blushes from Persona. I feel like everyone talks about the cream blushes from them, and I don't like the cream blushes. I want to. I always like keep going back to them and trying them. I don't like the cream blushes from them. For me, it's like these powders are the best powder blushes. I'm like shouting it from the rooftops, but all anyone wants to talk about are the creams. Okay, and then underrated, but not by me because I talk about it in every single video, is this from Catrice. This is kind of new. The Air Matte Blush. I have the shade Peach Heaven. I also have a mauve shade in this, which I like, but this is like the shade I've been wearing it sounded like I said the S word. I meant to say the shade I've been wearing every day. Whenever I say that in a video and I'm editing it back, it sounds like I'm saying something different. But I wore this blush over the weekend. I was at Hannah Louise Poston's baby shower, which was so much fun. I was there with so many of my favorite creators, and multiple people complimented my blush and asked, what are you wearing? And it was this little $6 blush from Catrice. Okay, highlighter. I was like, for a moment there, I was like, do I even include highlighter? I feel like a fraud including highlight because I'm just not in my highlighter era at the moment, which is so interesting. If you've been watching my channel for years, that used to be like my number one favorite thing. I wanted my highlight to blind you from like a mile away. I wanted you to see it. Now, I'm trying to think of the last time I wore highlight. It comes down to like a few times a month. That's it. I usually don't even wear it anymore. So I was like, does it make sense to choose a highlight? But maybe I'm going to come back around. I see that happening for me. There was like a minute there I thought I was returning to highlight, and then I was like, no. I like an all matte look. But you know, maybe it's just a phase. just a phase. But I still wanted to tell you my top 3. When I'm reaching for a highlight, these are the ones. But based on that description of my preference, as you might imagine, these are a little more subtle. They're not gonna blind you from across the street, okay? So probably my favorite is so funny. It's the REM highlighters. Specifically, I have the shade Miss Mercury, I love. I also have Miss Uranus. I like that one too. These have not a sheerness to them, but they don't have a very apparent base. So they're almost more like a topper, which makes sense because they call these highlighter toppers. And I think that name is so accurate. And I like that because it just looks almost a little more glassy on the skin. Like it's not too much. Sometimes a thicker, more pigmented powder highlight is just really visible on the skin. But I find because the base of this is a bit more subtle, I think there's more range in who can wear it because it doesn't have that base, like it's sitting on top, you know? But I also think it just looks less heavy and more lit from within, more skin-like. This is very smooth, it's beautiful. And the reason I said, funny enough, I should have finished that thought. The reason I said that was because I have been a hater of the REM line for the most part. So few products I have enjoyed, which bums me out because I'm like the biggest Ariana Grande stan. On my perfume tray right here, I have every perfume she makes, but almost every. And I love those. And I haven't loved the makeup, but the highlights in particular, these are like the one thing where I'm like, yeah, these are very, very, very good. Okay, this is the other product from Nabla, the Skin Glazing in the shade Privilege. The tone of this is actually kind of similar, not necessarily, but similar, like friends to the one I'm going to mention next. So when I am reaching for a highlight, I tend to like one that has almost this pink quality to it. So somewhat of a pink undertone or a subtle pink shift to it. And that's this. In the pan, you're like, Kelly, that's like a golden type of color. But on the skin, it almost has the most subtle pink shift to it. This, similar to the REM one, not a really prominent base to it. It more so just kind of like sits on top. This is also that baked formula, so it's a lot more smoothing than most highlighters. And then my other favorite is this one from Sigma. I'd have to be a little bit tan for this one. This is the shade Twilight. It's like this rosy highlight, and I like wearing this when I have a glowy blush going on. So I tend to do, okay, this is the combo. I'll take a little bit of a liquid blush and then a liquid highlight, mix that together, wear that, and then put this over my cheeks, and it's like the most perfect glowy cheek look. Because this has that rosy tone to it, it just like blends in really well with the blush. I am always team rosy highlight if I'm wearing a rosy blush, you know, but they blend together in a way that is just so harmonious. It doesn't look like you've got these like Neapolitan stripes on your cheek of like bronzer, blush, highlight. No, it's like all in one. It's like, oh, your cheek just glows. It like reflects the light. It's beautiful. I'm really team rosy highlight. I'm going to leave you on a cliffhanger with more favorites to come in part 2 on Friday. So those are all my favorites for the base. I will have everything linked as always. Thank you so much for watching, and I will go ahead and see you in my next video. Bye.